Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers podcast with your hosts, Hope Jay
and Lynn Catalano.
Every episode, we focus on recovery from narcissistic abuse. We talk about topics that we believe will help people to identify signs of abuse, learn strategies to cope, and most importantly, how to heal and move forward from narcissistic abuse. We are both survivors of narcissistic abuse ourselves, lawyers, and one of us is an author.
Well, thank you, Hope. My book, Wrecking Ball Relationships, How to Identify, Live With, or Leave the Narcissist in Your Life, is available in many places, including my website, lynncatalano.com.
Because we have been in your shoes, we know how difficult this journey can be. That is why I founded the Center for Hope of Western New York, a nonprofit organization which provides education, support, and advocacy for survivors of narcissistic abuse. You can find out more about the Center for Hope at centerforhopewny.org, and all donations are gratefully welcomed and tax exempt.
Please follow us on Instagram at NarcSlayersPod, and also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube, the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. You can also email us directly with your questions at narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org.
Welcome back to the Narcissist Slayers. I'm your co-host, Hope Jay.
And I'm your co-host, Lynn Catalano.
And today we have a very special guest, Heather Quick. Heather Quick is the host of Women Winning Divorce podcast. She's the founder and CEO of the only divorce and family law firm for women in the Northeast Florida, Florida Women's Law Group, located in Jacksonville, Florida. She holds a Juris Doctorate from Stetson University College of Law. Before starting Florida Women's Law Group, Heather was an associate professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and an adjunct professor at Florida Coastal School of Law. Heather has authored 4 books with a 5th in progress. She is also the creator and host of the podcast Women Winning Divorce, where she engages in discussions on family law topics and trends with industry leaders on a weekly basis. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
And Heather, Lynn and I were guests on your podcast a couple of months ago. So we're so excited to have you as a guest on our podcast so that we can kind of continue the conversation that we were having. This is a really important work that you're doing. And we're so excited to be able to talk with you more about what it is that you're doing to help women.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So we're just going to jump right in. So can you tell us what inspired you to start your all-woman law firm, the Florida Women's Law Group?
Oh, I'd love to. So I'm going to give credit to my mom, right? So, and I've told her before, right, everything she's been through was not for nothing, because I got a front row seat. So she's married and divorced, I think 3 times. I think the 4th time this is stuck, right? And so I watched those divorces go through and breakups, and not really as aware of it till I was already practicing family law. And I'm watching my clients and they just want to give up. And it was a very similar pattern that I'd seen. And, I was like, yeah, that's the way, my mom was until she, I think with that last divorce, had a really tough female attorney that really just helped inspire her and, go for what she was entitled to. And I started to realize that I liked representing these women. I want to help them because it's like they get so close. They don't realize how close we are to the finish, but they just want to cave and they don't want to, stick it out for what they're entitled to. They're worried about money. Of course, they're worried about their kids and their husbands telling them, they're greedy, they're selfish, blah, 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 all these things that they believe. And I thought, if we could be the strength for them and come in and help them over that hump, what a great thing we could do, because there's so many emotions in family law. Mm-hmm. And my experience is watching women, and before I, transition, there's a period of time I represented men and women. And there's usually, a man on the other side of the divorce. So, men handle it like a business transaction. It's very compartmentalized. And then we're talking about money. Like, it has nothing to do with the kids, even though you're being so harsh. And the women are like, wait a minute, I'm like the mother of your kids. And like, don't you recognize that without this, it's going to make this more difficult? Like, it's just so, so different in the way I think that they experience divorce and the way they view the whole thing. And I thought, well, if we could step them and help them through this, because they really tend to follow the same pattern of behavior and fear, that we could change the way they're going through divorce and help them in a way that other attorneys don't, frankly, because when you represent both sides, you don't really have an opinion or a point of view. You just are like, well, what do you want? Okay, well, we'll try to do that. Maybe we won't try. Who knows? But we have a real point of view on helping women, really recognizing their value, what they're worth, and being the strength for them. Like, we can go to trial. Like, she's offering you nothing at a settlement. Like, you got to go. The law's on your side. So,
Heather, it's interesting because I have conversations with my colleagues. I'm also a family law attorney. And one of the things that we've talked about amongst ourselves, the women lawyers, is we kind of believe that women are better attorneys. And particularly, that's a lot of the things that you just mentioned. I think that it does point to the strengths that not only women, that we have as women, but the strengths that we have as women lawyers, right? And that kind of leads into our second question.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, Hope, thank you for the great segue.
Yeah, right.
Heather, how do you think women lawyers advocating for female only clients give your clients an edge in their family law cases?
well, we have a lot of it. One, we're women ourselves, right? So we do value women. And big plus right there, right? You got to make note of that nowadays. We value women, mothers, and wives while we're working, right? Like, so we're doing all of those things. And hopefully for many of these women, it's something they can look to as strength, right? We're figuring it out, right? On that part. But we also really care about you as women, as your role as a wife, as you separate how you're still going to parent. And, one of the biggest things, and I feel like I can be critical of lawyers because I am one. But I am, a human being first. A lot of lawyers forget that. And we listen. I know lawyers love to talk and talk about themselves. You come and say, well, I want this, and that's not going to happen. That's not the law. And it's like, well, the reality is you don't know. You have to listen to the facts and you have to ask why. And what does that mean to you? And I feel like women, generally speaking, are good listeners. We
Yes.
really practice that in my office. And often I'll say, and stop talking to my lawyers, to everybody, like, ask this question and just wait. And it may take them a while to answer, but let's hear from our clients. For many reasons, right? We need to know what they're thinking, because if they are really have unrealistic expectations, we got to help them understand the law. But first we have to understand where they are, what they want, and then why. Because the why is the most important part. Because, okay, that sounds like some good reasons. Let's unpack that. Or those may be challenging. So now let's try to help you recognize the system we're in, the reality of your situation. And only by listening to them do we know where they start. And so I think that's where we can really provide it that way and care enough about them, of course, to listen to them, but then deliver the truth, right?
Yeah.
Which is what people want, and say, but hey, if there's a way legally, ethically, we can try this, we will. It may lead you to a lot of litigation, but we're on this together. We're not just running your case based on what we think you want. We're making these decisions together. So I do think that makes us better, by being all women.
I agree 100%. And you starting an all women law group, that actually was a dream that I had. So I'm very, you're doing great work in the world, and I'm so glad that you were able to follow through and do that and follow your dream and provide these, this perspective and this advocacy for women. So I'm wondering, I could answer this, but I'm interested in what you think. What are the 3 greatest challenges you have experienced representing women in divorce cases?
I think, there are many, that I want to say one of the things, right, that because we're women and they're women, sometimes they're unsure of the boundaries and they think maybe, this should be more of a friendship thing. We're not being paid, that, oh, I didn't know I'd pay for all that. That's one thing, helping them really, this is a valuable resource. We're not just your girlfriend talking this through, that you to pay. And for you to think that because we're women helping women, we should not be reimbursed, completely flies in the face of women, being in control. So that comes oh, you're a woman, you should be doing things for free.
Mm.
We hear that a lot from women.
Wow.
And it's just, they're not seeing things, I guess, the way we see things. But, so that's one. I think two, this is, obviously we represent women, a lot of emotions
Mhm.
that sometimes they have a lot of trouble reining in.
Yes.
And that's why when I was saying that tough love, the truth, you can't afford for us to be your best friend. We ought not be. We're not going to be. And a lot of the time, and then they get upset because generally attorneys want to help. They want to listen. Okay, you want to do this, you want to do that. And it's no, 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 no. We have to see if that helps us achieve our objective because we want to say yes. But then it's well, if this doesn't get us any closer to the prize, this is going to cost you a lot more money and not get us there, and you're going to be mad. You don't know that right now,
Right.
but I promise you, you will be. So a lot of times, reining in out, no, we can't talk every day. You've exhausted, and that's
Just had this
really a
conversation with
difficult
a
thing.
client. It's tough, but you're absolutely right. Yep.
And I think lastly, just and I would say a challenge, but I do think sometimes it it can be harder for women with children to step back a little bit and look at the big picture, right? When they're age of their children and the age of majority in Florida is 18, right? So, and I can say, hey, I love my children dearly, right? I understand, I get it, but when we're in a case, not of abuse, of not anything like that, just your husband's a good guy, and kind of separating yourself from the identity of being only a mother, a wife, and when that means your child's going to be with their father, and really helping them see maybe the bigger picture, or where they're 12, 6 years till they're 18, and it goes by so quickly, but then you've got so many more years of their life that you're not going to be mandated by court order on rules and things that you have to do. And I'm not saying they're wrong in those beliefs, but just helping them get to the reality of divorce, and courts creating parenting plans and the schedules and things like that. And it's a challenge because I get it. I'm completely, empathetic. However, we've got to try to get them some closure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very challenging
Mm-hmm.
position, I think, when you want to do all of the things, right? You need to be an advocate. You need to be able to help them to understand what the possible gains and losses are of their decisions.
Right.
Sometimes you have to give them really difficult information and tell them things they don't want to hear.
Oh, yeah.
And that flies in the face of what you said, one of the other things that you said, as far as trying to establish this rapport, right? And this relationship where sometimes I think the boundaries do get a little bit blurred. And, I'm not your friend, I'm your lawyer. I actually had this
Mm-hmm.
conversation with a client or just today. So everything you said was spot on, Heather.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So, Heather, this is an interesting question because I'm not sure how much you want to reveal, but Do you have a general strategy when you're representing a woman who has experienced domestic violence in their marriage?
Well, that's a tricky one, right? Because there's a couple different ways that it can go. Sometimes they're not going to say anything.
Wow.
And they're not going to do anything. And that's a time for, it's tough love, but it's a reality check and it's the truth. And for me, and we say, well, if you're engaging us and we're doing this, it comes out now, or forever hold your peace about something in the past because they're not going to believe you. It's already hard enough, right? And if you think this is a card to be played, we don't do that. That's not how this works, right? It's serious. Many times I hear enough where I'm the one who is like, I think something's wrong. I think you need an injunction. Let's delve into this. I know you're here for divorce, but we got to talk about your safety and those items. And so then sometimes they're terrified, it just depends. But there have been cases where like, I'm not doing it. Like, okay. They're like, I can get out. I can be safe, and those are generally, I think, when there aren't children, because when there are children, they'll do it for their kids. The protection order, right? They'll seek that other than themselves. But, so that's always the first thing. Like, okay, what's the safety situation? How do we address that? Because it's like I said, right? If this has been happening, that's the time to address it. Not later. It's never a negotiating tool, in my opinion. It's not. It's not to be used in that way. And we don't do that in our firm. And I don't think. I know people say that. Oh, you're using that. Well, I would think that's just, of course, very wrong. But so that's where we start. And then, that one, there's so much. I really want them to get counseling because there's so much emotional abuse that's gone on usually, in the whole spectrum of domestic violence, and that they need someone trained. I've been doing this a really long time. I've been doing it longer than any of my attorneys. But none of us are trained therapists. And when they come to us, obviously, if we know that, like, we are going to seek their safety, but we are doing it through our channels, which are how to keep you legally there, right? We're not dealing with a lot of the other stuff. And in the divorce, we've got to look for what's going to get you in the best position legally. So counseling is really got to be, they've got to engage in that because there's so much as they're coming out of it. They have so much to talk about, and there's so much, trauma that they really haven't talked about. So we really, line that up. And when we do pursue an injunction, that allows for a lot more protection. Like, when we're in court and things, right, to provide some safeguards for them. But eventually, we have to go to mediation in the state of Florida. It doesn't mean we're all going to be in the same room. But oftentimes, when there's an injunction, so obviously there are protections, like, it can put you in a better position, when we're negotiating, and not to negotiate the injunction or whatever, but they know that you've at least had somebody help you stand up for yourself. And that's new, which I know places a lot of women in more danger, in many instances. However, it's the only way to kind of go forward. And I think that allows there to begin the beginning of a new pattern of the way you interact with your spouse. So, that can be helpful and easier to end up negotiating a settlement.
Thank you.
So that's interesting. So every case, regardless of whether there's, you say injunction, we here in New York, it's an order of protection. They will direct everybody to mediation, regardless if there's a power and control dynamic in the relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if your attorney doesn't really understand, they're not going to help. I don't think, recognize those nuances of why the client's going to disagree to anything. Yes, but that is the law, that all divorces and all modifications, as well as fraternities, are required to go to mediation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very different than how it's done in New York. So then how what would you say are the greatest obstacles facing women in the family court system?
Well, I think for one, it's just a complete unknown, and that is always difficult and it's an obstacle because you don't understand how it's going to go. And the current laws in the state of Florida, which we were a little later than a lot of the other states to amend our family laws, and which would happen in 2023. So there's been changes in alimony. We used to have more of a pro alimony, lifetime alimony. That no longer exists. It's still appropriate in many cases, and I know there are ways to kind of get around it a little bit, right? There are always exceptions. And the law changed to basically make the beginning of a child time sharing arrangement, parenting plan, which is custody. We call it time sharing in Florida. That it really starts at a 50-50. I know, because you're
Okay.
going to share time with your children and you don't have custody of them as if they're property. Although, when you negotiate, many people talk about them like they're property. But, and so that's a big hurdle to overcome because there's so many things that go into that, right? Because
Yeah.
that affects child support. There's so much financial.
Yep.
And then, if you are in those abusive situations, now you actually have to almost go prove all that to then have it in a different way. So
Right.
that's a big obstacle.
So you're kind of starting at the presumption of 50-50, and you
Yes,
have to move away from that. It's
correct.
it's it's similar in Florida or in New York. It's not codified. It's not a statute, but it
Uh-huh.
tends to be the
Hmm.
predominant perspective of family court judges. So I think
Yeah.
it's
And it
yeah,
was changing, as like compared to when I started practicing,
right.
20, 25 years ago. There's all, mom every other weekend and a dinner night. That was it.
Yep.
Like, don't even bother asking for anything else. And it had started to change more so, say, in South Florida, making its way up to North Florida, and pretty much judge specific and still somewhat fact specific. So now it's at least the starting point of the evaluation. It's codified in the law.
Very good. Have you had any cases against attorneys who brand themselves fathers' rights attorneys? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
So yeah, there's a firm that's men only, that's been around before I started my firm. And really throughout Florida, like I remember in law school seeing billboards, like, men only. It's so silly. That men need an extra advantage, right? Um, so anyway, it's not as much now. Like before the law changed, that was their big thing, right? We're going to keep you from getting railroaded in court and really, fighting for that equal time with your kids. And they did have more of an uphill battle, right? And at that time, but times have really changed. And so not everywhere, but more so, both parents are working, not always maybe equal, but like more participating fathers, say, than 20 years ago as a whole, as a stereotype. So I think that where they really started with that, which is true, like that would have been very difficult to get much more than that. And I think, and many of them didn't want that, but what they wanted is to pay less. So really, to me, that's my opinion. They are good attorneys, but the men that are going there are like, I don't want to pay anything. And
That's a
that's a
good that's
very broad generalization that I'm just saying because I'm on your podcast and that's what we can say. That's my point of
yeah.
view.
So, but it's kind of connected to that whole father's rights thing. I mean, we have firms here and lawyers here who have kind of branded themselves the father's rights attorneys, and I would agree with you that it's a certain personality I think that would
Hmm.
go to an attorney who's essentially saying, I'm gonna bulldoze it, over this person and do whatever I can do. to, get you what you want. But if I'm just curious, and I know it's not on the questions per se, but I wanted to ask your opinion about this. When you are dealing with a woman who you have assessed is in an abusive relationship, and you have done all that you do as her attorney to ensure that she has an injunction, and that the court is aware of the power dynamic and the abuse that's been in the relationship. When you're up against one of these lawyers that is trying to, erase that reality, because they tend to come really hard
Mm-hmm.
when there are abuse allegations. Do you or have you had, a case or cases where you have had false allegations of parental alienation being thrown at your client? And if so, how have you been dealing with that?
So we have, and in particular, my partner has dealt with it more recently. In some cases she's had, it's difficult. I'm telling you, I feel like the men just say that, and then boom, everybody's questioning it and wondering. And it's like, well, what about the evidence, the proof? It is a loaded word
Yes.
that gets thrown around. And hey, maybe, there are a lot of words that, people look up, because I think, if they are researching, she says I'm a narcissist, they're going to say, well, then say she's alienating you, right? Like, I think that's kind of usually the way it goes. So yeah, they're buried. And even when those cases are extremely difficult,
Yes.
because it's so factual and it's so nuanced, and the courts just don't want to believe it. I mean, let's be clear. And they don't want to bother and believe that to be true. So it can be extremely costly, difficult,
Yes.
and getting the right experts to really delve in, very expensive, right? You need the right experts to really look at it, understand what's going on, usually coming through lots of records, lots of accounts. So it's a difficult thing. I think we still do see it, occasionally, and, the women get accused of it, certainly, a lot more than men.
And yes, and I mean, the literature, the psychological and psychiatric literature has basically said, this is not a thing, right? So it's very, very frustrating. I just was wondering if there, were specific sort of strategies that you take. But yes, I agree, it's very difficult. So, what three pieces of advice would you give to women who are about to commence a divorce proceeding who have just been served?
So understand the severity of being served. You've got time, a time period. Do not think that is a suggestion. That is a time period with which you've got to take action. Putting your head in the sand, this is not the time for that. This is not the time to crawl under the covers and cry and not do anything. Like, you've got a certain amount of time, and you need an attorney. You need to understand what's going on. That you are now in the court system. I don't care if your husband says you don't need an attorney, you do. You need to understand your rights, but also what is coming, right? What this is going to look like. So I suggest that they do some research and find an attorney. Find an attorney who understands and listens to you, and asks you what your objectives and goals are. Number two, gather your financials, right? If you've already been served, he's ahead of you. And I don't mean to dishearten you, but like, he's already figured all this out. And so now you need to play a little bit catch up and understand, like, hey, where are our bank accounts? What's going on? Where's the money? Has he cut me off? What credit cards? Those basic necessities, I think, is really, really important. And lastly, and this will be for if you have children, and it depends, like, everybody's different with their relationship with their spouse and, ex, but I would, and also cautiously, communicate with your ex in writing and in voicemail. Watch your tongue. You're now under the spotlight. Just watch your tongue. Be careful. Um, and, but I think when there's children, you should really look at starting some counseling and if possible, and this is just a big if, can you two agree on how to tell the children? And he may already have, like, right, if you didn't see this coming. So, but I do think that's important. And even if you don't have children, you should inquire into counseling or coaching. You need that support system. You're going to need people around you. And to think your attorney can serve that other role is incorrect. So, I would, and maybe a divorce coach can really work with you to help you express, hey, this is what I want from an attorney. This is what I need, and help you get ready for that. Like, there's just so many benefits. I'm a big proponent of the coaching because I just feel like it helps you move forward. I think therapy is great to help you understand why you did what you did and all those things. But, in the divorce process where often things get stuck, it's good to have somebody helping you move forward.
All great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Heather, could you tell us the inspiration behind your Women Winning Divorce podcast and who's your audience? What's your message?
So, my audience is all women, that maybe have been through a divorce, contemplating divorce, or are going through it. And really we're, eventually we'll broaden that, right? Like for just women winning in life, right? And the message that I really believe wholeheartedly is that you can win if you achieve your goals. And too often we think, hey, they're, if I've heard it once, I've heard it, 1,000 times, and no one wins in divorce. It's like, well, you can look at it that way. And I think that's kind of a negative Nancy way to look at it. Or you can say, I have an objective and I have a goal. And if I achieve that, I have one. And relish in those small things. Like this is a step forward. It doesn't mean it's not difficult. I've extricated myself from this relationship where I'm not the best person I can be. It's not serving me or our children or anybody else. And we're going to be better parents, hopefully separate, and we're going to be better people. Then I think that's a win. And that is what I'm trying to do. One, educate women on the process. And that's why I love talking with lawyers, therapists, financial, everybody, education that I just felt was lacking. And also with, we have to maybe comments, put a positive twist. Okay, if you think that, we can all have that option. We all have that choice. We can see that half empty or half full. And, if you practice being optimistic, you can get there and you can, achieve these small wins for yourself. And I really believe that. And I felt like we could do that in a podcast and bring great guests, great content that is directed to women and, really help them with the resource. Podcasts are great. Nobody has to see you reading it, right? You're just listening.
Right.
And you can do that on your time. No one has to know. Not public. You can really get information in a way that is completely safe and anonymous. And, the more women that can be educated and empowered before they go into this, I think the better off they will all be.
Absolutely. And our listeners are predominantly women who are recovering from narcissistic abuse. And a lot of these women are who are listening today. I think that, it would be helpful if you have covered topics on your podcast that are specifically related to intimate partner abuse, domestic violence, narcissistic abuse. Are there any specific episodes that, that you've done or that you could recommend to our listeners?
Yes, that, ooh, we've done so many. And we recently, and I didn't have the numbers on there, but you know what? We'll send them to you so that they can be in the show notes. But Dr. Christine Cochiola has been on our show, amazing, on the coercive control. I've had a couple other people on the coercive control that's been really good stuff. And she wrote a book with her partner. We just recorded that episode. Got a lot of amazing stuff with therapists who really specify in that trauma, in the trauma bond, in different ways of therapy to help you that have been extremely enlightening. I recently recorded a podcast with the creator of a new AI specifically for women who are victims of abuse and still suffering in post divorce abuse, like unbelievable. So yeah, we have a lot, and we'll certainly give you some highlight episodes for the show notes. But there's a lot of good stuff, and from a lot of really well reputable experts who have done the research
Right.
and have a lot to say to help. And a lot of it is heavy, right? We're not all laughing and giggling, not all the time at all, really, but it's so valuable. It's such good content that any women who are your listeners and still kind of just in it and looking for that, please. And you can check it out because they're usually titled, so you'll see, oh, that would be a great one for me because this is our third year. So we've got, quite a list of experts, and in particular in narcissism, coercive control, that I think would be a great help.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. On that note, are there any other resources that you would recommend to women just starting out on this journey, particularly listening right now or watching us on YouTube, and they'd like to know where else would you recommend that they go to learn things?
So in addition to the podcast, and there are a lot of great podcasts out there, right? And that really, I feel like that's a great medium. I love to listen to stuff. So it allows me to do more than one thing at a time. But also on our website, which is FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com, we have a lot of resources there. And we also have a course called Divorce 101 that you can take. And that you may, like, if you're just trying to, like, step into it and try, it's going to really outline a lot of the stages and a lot of the overwhelm that you may feel once you begin the process by all the information and things that your attorney is going to want from you to help you start to prepare yourself, which is great. And it can also, I've got, I think 4 books now, and we have some other books. One, and then you can request one from our office. It's called Time to Fly, and it is compiled of stories of our former clients. So when you feel like I'm all alone, and they're great, these women open them up, and I just wanted, I feel there's the potential to feel so lonely, and nobody understands. Nobody's been through it. A lot of different variations from abuse, addiction, all kind of things. Working moms, not working moms. So you'll know you're not alone. And they're great. They're really well done. We can send that to them. And I know we've got an ebook version. And we also have a guided journal. Because sometimes you're just not ready to go to the attorney's office, but you're not sure. And this one will kind of help maybe just with some prompts to really see where you are in it. So those are a lot of resources that we have to just help you figure it out before you're jumping right in.
It sounds all like amazing. Great information. In fact, I'm going to direct my clients.
I think what they get overwhelmed, and I understand it's a lot, right? And especially you don't know the legal language, you don't know what to expect, but it's like, but if you take it in small bites and you start doing it, right? You got to start doing it for yourself. You can't rely on your attorney to do everything and then expect all these amazing results. You've got to be a partner and just engage. And even if you don't want this or whatever, it's happening, it's usually happening. So you got to get on board, stick up for yourself.
So Heather, I just want to thank you for everything that you do. What you're putting out into the world, helping the women through your law group and the podcast and the books that you're writing. This is invaluable information for women who are looking to reclaim their lives. And that's what we're doing as well. So glad that we could continue the conversation with you.
Oh, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time
All right.
on the Narcissist Slayers.
Yay.